Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 65 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. So, today I want to talk about looking. Well, I want to talk about looking not necessarily through the camera's viewfinder, through the camera's viewing screen, but rather I want to talk about looking at photographs, looking at other people's photographs, specifically great photographs. So I was prompted to talk about this in this particular episode of Camera Position by a note from a guy named Paul M., who wrote to me, and he's been listening to both Camera Position and also the History of Photography podcast that I do. And he wrote to me, and he said this: "I've been listening to your podcast, and I was hoping you would entertain my question. I have been thinking about all of the photos that have been taken over time. How can one look through the viewfinder of the camera and not think that it's all been done before, that the things I might want to photograph has no original thought to it? If you don't mind compiling your thoughts on this, I know there's an internal component to the answer that I'd have to deal with. It's just that your podcasts have caused me to think about this. Thanks for your time in responding." So, first of all, I'm really glad that the podcasts are making Paul and hopefully some other folks think about things, and that's a really good thing, and certainly one of the reasons that I'm here. But I think Paul raises a really interesting question. The question's one that I've thought about for quite a long time, and I think the answer to the question is the question, how can you look through the viewfinder and not think that it's all been done before, is that you can't. You can't. And I think that that's the whole point of studying photography, studying its history, studying the practitioners who have come before us and so forth. And I've always thought about it in terms of this sort of thought process. One of my goals is to see as many photographs as I can, to be able to saturate my mind so much that when I confront a given subject, I really don't have any idea whether the photograph I see in my head, the one that I'm thinking, golly, should I make that picture, was made by Adams or Weston or Soth or any of the other photographers whose work I really enjoy looking at. So I then end up dealing with the subject matter in my own way. And I think that one of the solutions to this problem is not just to saturate yourself, to saturate your head with as many different photographers' work as possible, but really to develop a sense of connoisseurship, a sense of what it is that makes photographs good. And one of the solutions to that certainly is looking at photographs that have been avowed as good, avowed by curators, avowed by museum directors, avowed by people who have some sense of what it is that they are interested in and what is good, what quality really is and what it represents. So obviously getting yourself to art galleries and art museums is a huge, huge part of this. One of the things that I've had as a question from both podcast listeners and also from students over the years is, how do I know when a print is good? What do I know about that print? How do I know what that, when I've made a print and I think it's good, how do I know whether in fact it is good? What's my benchmark? What's my rubric that I'm going to measure this against? And I think that the answer is you've got to find out what that good quality is. I think it has to do with the same kinds of things that we deal with food or wine or relationships or anything else, that what we have to do is find out the sort of range of possibilities, the things that are not so good and the things that are great and the things that are in between. So one of the solutions that I have had over the years is not just to collect books of photography, but also to collect photographs. And one of the questions I ask a lot of photographers is, how many photographs do you own that are not your own? Photographs that you've collected from friends, photographs that you've collected from galleries and museums, photographs that you've bought from photographers. You see a piece that you really just can't live without, a piece that you really find that moves you in some way, and you have to have it. And I think that that is an important part of becoming a photographer, collecting photographs. If you think about this, would you try to become a writer without having read anything? Would you try to become a novelist without having collected a series of novels and read them over and over again and really examined how they're put together, the great novels, and be able to think about things in that way? So I do want to ask you to ask yourselves, how many photographs do I have in my collection of photographs? Real photographs, not books of photographs and not reproductions or posters, but real photographs. And yes, sometimes that means a financial outlay that is fairly substantial, but any collection can start small and move big. And many, many collections have started out that way. I know that my collection is rather eclectic. I have a lot of photographs from friends and colleagues and other photographers whose work I've admired, and I've swapped prints with them. I also have a lot of photographs that I have purchased over the years, some for small sums of money and some that are masterpieces of photography that I have figured out ways to be able to afford. And in fact, in the visual section of the enhanced podcast, I've been slowly putting in here as I've gone along some of the images that are in my collection, some of the things that I have decided to have value to me as objects that I can contemplate and admire over time. Think about beginning to collect photography. And one of the ways to begin to think about collecting photography is to walk into a photo gallery and say, here's my deal. My deal is I'm a photographer. I'm really interested in photography. These are the kinds of photographs that I find most interesting. What kinds of photographers do you carry in your roster of artists that are similar to those ideas? And if you don't carry those sorts of photographers, if you don't represent them, who does? Where can I go to take a look at those things? Now, some of you are saying, well, I live in a small place and there aren't many galleries. Well, we all travel from time to time, and certainly one of the great places to go when you're somewhere that is not your home is to go to galleries and museums. I know that I was not too long ago in San Francisco and saw some amazing photo shows at both private galleries and also public museums, and really enjoyed those experiences. And it helped me to develop that sense of connoisseurship, that sense of what it is that I like. Another great venue is study rooms, photography study rooms. There are two of them here in the Chicago area where I live that I have used, and one of them is at the Art Institute of Chicago on Michigan Avenue, and they have a remarkable photography study facility. You don't need to be a member of the museum. You don't need to be anybody other than somebody interested in photography. You call them up, you make an appointment, they sit you down with a beautiful box of prints, and you get to sit down and take a look at how photographers have dealt with visual problems, how photographers have dealt with technical problems, and how photographers have solved those problems photographically. So, and I know that some of the photographs that I've seen in that space have really changed my opinion about what it is that photography is and how photography works. And certainly one of my favorites is Paul Strand's photograph of Mr. Bennett. And I discovered, after looking at that picture for, golly, a long time, discovered that there was really just one itty-bitty little highlight, a tiny little highlight that was just a little reflection on the button on Mr. Bennett's shirt, and that highlight was sufficient to really enliven the photograph. Even though the photograph was largely in gray values, Mr. Bennett's button had just enough light value to give the print that life that it needed. And I've learned similar things about some of the other important photographs that I've seen there, especially variations on photographs. And some museums will have collections where they'll have several different variations on single photographs. So another study room in the photography or in the Chicago metropolitan area is at Columbia College. Columbia College Chicago has the Museum of Contemporary Photography, and they too have a photography print study room where you can sit down and examine a box of photographs and really spend time with them, not under glass and so forth and so on. So I would encourage you, even if you can't afford to collect photographs, to begin to collect experiences of looking at photographs. And I heard an interesting statement at a conference not too long ago, and I think it kind of sums up this idea for today's podcast. And it was, inventive ideas come from recontextualizing the past. Inventive ideas come from recontextualizing the past. Now, think about that. Inventive ideas come from recontextualizing the past. What we're really doing when we make something new is taking the past and thinking about it in a different way. So don't be afraid that looking at photographs will sort of fill up your head with the style or the idea of some of those great photographers, but rather think about the way in which it will impact you on down the road, both as a creative technical person and as a creative visual person. So collecting, looking, spending time looking at things. And, we all know that reproductions in books really don't come close to the actual photographic image, whether it's a silver print or a color C print or an inkjet print. There is a richness and a lushness to these images that really only comes across live in person. So the screen doesn't do it, the book doesn't do it, the magazine doesn't do it, no matter how good the magazine is. Even if you're looking at the amazing reproductions in Lenswork magazine, it still does not replicate the experience of standing in front of, or better yet, sitting in front of, with it in your hands, a beautiful print of an image. So begin to think about building a collection. Begin to think about collecting photographs, but if you can't collect photographs, collect experience of looking at photographs. So thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Camera Position, and thanks to those of you who've stopped by the weblog page, that's cameraposition.com, and left a comment. I really appreciate those comments, and also thanks to those of you who have clicked through on Amazon and now on B&H Photo. It helps me offset some of the cost of producing Camera Position and having all of these podcast files up there. And those of you who have gone out and bought Camera Position t-shirts and coffee mugs, that's just great. And I'd love someday to be walking somewhere and see somebody wearing a Camera Position t-shirt. So thanks again for those of you who are out there supporting me and helping to spread the word about the idea of Camera Position, which is the podcast about creative photography. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com